Hey, what's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. It is a Friday heading into a big series for the Philadelphia Phillies against the Houston Astros, a World Series matchup. Phillies win 2 out of 3 against the Seattle Mariners, 3 straight series victories, and finally they are back to the 500 mark after a very bumpy start to the season. Anthony, it's been an impressive rebound for a Phillies team that you still feel like hasn't quite found its full stride here yet, but a nice stabilization nonetheless. And now they're going to have to turn things up a notch, playing a Houston team that, talking about hitting its stride, the Astros certainly have here the back end of this month of April.
Yeah, absolutely, Bob. And, I was looking forward to this episode. And before I dive into the Phillies real quick, I think we have to do one quick little house cleaning thing. I forgot to mention to this to you before we hit record. Normally people have been getting our morning after Crossed Up episodes, and we did none this week. Just want to explain why. Obviously, Monday there was no game, so we didn't have one on Tuesday. Wednesday morning, totally my fault, but at the same time, I woke up with either a muscle spasm or a pinched nerve or something in my neck. I couldn't move Wednesday morning. Don't get old, man. Don't get old. When I woke up, it was I had so much pain. I was typing with one hand the entire day because my right shoulder and arm was killing me. So I didn't do one Wednesday, and then of course we don't do one if there's a matinee game on a Thursday like we had yesterday. So just so everybody knows. But yes, being 13-13, it took a little bit longer, I think, than we would have anticipated them to get to the 500 mark, Bob, right? Or even above it, which they have yet to be this season. But I think there's a lot of encouraging signs pointing in the right direction for the Phillies. They've won 3 straight series. They've really kind of stabilized. And although they haven't looked dominant yet, they have looked consistently better on the whole as a team. Really, when you think about it, when you start the year 0-4, and you're 13-9 since, if you go 13-9 every 22 games, you're a really good team. So I think that they're kind of, they're getting there, right? And yes, you're right. The next 6 games are more than the next 6. I mean, the next 4 opponents are tough, but the next 6, I think, are the real testers because you're going to face a lot of good pitching, and you're on the road. So it's going to be interesting to see how things pan out with Houston and LA, because after that you come back home and a certain someone will probably be in the lineup at that point.
Is that are we on the record with that? Do we have that on good authority? Is that just a hunch?
So it's funny.
Listen, if everyone has to understand, Anthony is now taking the lead with the Crossing Broad baseball Phillies coverage here. And one thing that is very different about Anthony and I is that he's actually a good reporter, and he'll talk to anybody. I mean, he'll talk to the janitor, right? Whereas I go down and I'm like, here are my observations. Like, I love the baseball. I love to be like, this is what I saw. Here's what's going well, what's not. Anthony's a people person. So I'm a little bit mousy, believe it or not. As loud as I can be and as much as I talk on this podcast, I'm a little timid down in the clubhouse. Anthony, man, like, I don't know. I got like 4 different texts from Anthony yesterday. Like, I talked to this guy. I heard this. You won't believe this. I'm like, all right. So are you coming with insider info here?
Well, I'll say that this isn't anything that's ridiculous. I mean, we were all talking to Rob Thompson in his office yesterday because it was weird. It was the first time that we've actually done it. Usually we talk to them in the dugout, right? But I guess because it was an early game and it was cold, there was a little bit of a chance of a little bit of rain pregame. So they did it in his office. So we were all kind of cramped in there. And like it got to a point in the interview where it was early and there was like no question being asked. And so like everybody's kind of looking around at each other. And so finally, I forget who it even was that asked the question. Just somebody just threw out a Bryce Harper thing and about, what's next week look like? And he says, and he's like, well, we don't know until he sees the doctor, but my hope is that he'll be cleared and he'll be right back with us, next week. And it was like, oh, okay. Like, he's like, I feel that that's the case. Like that will be the case, but we'll wait and see with the doctor. So I think next Friday is a home run. I do. Yeah. I think that's what it's going to be. As long as he's cleared May 1st, which is when he's seeing Elatraj, I think next Friday against Boston is his return to play.
So the way this will work is he sees ElAttrache on Monday, May 1st.
Well, or was that Tuesday? Whatever May 1st is. I don't know. I don't remember. I know it's May 1st.
I think it is Monday. So he sees him Monday out in LA. Phillies are in LA. They play the Dodgers. 1, 2, 3 off day coming home. And then you have the Red Sox at home next weekend.
Yeah.
Let's get it going.
Yeah, and I think so. And he just to kind of give a little bit more to that, he did say that they're bringing a couple of minor league pitchers on the trip with them so that they can keep pitching to Harper. And so he's going to face live batting in Houston today and Sunday. And then the plan for LA will depend on what the doctor says.
So I would imagine, I'm giving the Phillies some benefit of the doubt here. There are going to be a lot of people that are going to applaud this remarkable recovery. They're going to talk about, wow, what a gamer this guy is. There are going to be some people, though, that hesitate and say, we know Bryce Harper's personality. It's an alpha personality. He wants to be back on the field. He's probably still running off the adrenaline and the high of what he experienced last October. He wants to get back out there for this team. Well-intentioned, but is it stupid? Is this overly aggressive? And we've talked about the previous timelines and how long it takes players to come back from this. And he is definitely pushing the envelope. He's going to be at the front end of this thing. It's almost unprecedented, this turnaround. So there are going to be people that say, wait a minute, should they take a couple extra weeks here? We went from the All-Star break to mid-June to Memorial Day to Cinco de Mayo. I mean, it's insane how this thing has been expedited. And so you do have to kind of wonder, like, is this smart? Because they cannot afford for him to go back on the shelf. Like, this has to work.
Yeah, and I think that they are handling it the right way, Bob, because, I mean, yes, I mean, he's a huge boost to the lineup. There's no question. He's an MVP caliber player, right? So you want him in as soon as possible. But because of the investment they have in him, they're not going to, rush something that just to get him out there. They want to make sure everything is okay. He did slide. Has been practicing sliding, although he's been sliding feet first, not head first. And so that's a thing, right? And so they got to figure that part out. That's like the last real hurdle that they have. But I do think that, the way that they've been playing offensively, even though that we've had some frustrating moments where they're not bringing runners in when they're in scoring position or on base, the fact that they're getting 10, 12 hits a game a lot of nights, and the fact that a lot of guys are probably exceeding expectations offensively to start the season, and they seem to have stabilized the team at this point. I think that they would be, if they felt that they needed to be a little bit more cautious, they would. So I think when you put all the pieces together, that it adds up to say that the Phillies are not putting him in a spot where rushing him back. I think that they're being smart about it, and anybody who's panicked about, he's going to go play first base, and that's going to make how's that going to happen? That's not going to happen right away. He's going to be a DH for at least a month, if not longer, probably longer. If he plays first base, I'm going to say, I'll make a prediction, it may be just before the All-Star break that he gives that a shot, but I still think it's an after the All-Star break kind of thing.
Yeah, I tend to think, I raised the question because I think it is worth acknowledging or considering, but I tend to believe that they know what's at stake with this player. And I think that Bryce Harper knows what's at stake. He's in his prime right now. He does not want to come back, rush this thing, play for 2-3 weeks, have it blow up. He's out for the year. See you in 2024. Like, he knows that this team has the potential to be in the mix for a title. He knows that this is a season in which if he only misses when it's all said and done, roughly 32 games, something along those lines.
Yeah.
He can still put together a hell of a season over 130 games here. And so I think that you have to understand all the variables. And I'd like to think that both he and the Phillies are smart enough to realize here, hey, if it required another 15 days, if you were going to truly benefit from waiting another 15 to 30 days, and we knew that it was going to make you so much more likely to stay on the field, I think they would probably exercise that caution. So it's just something you kind of want to acknowledge. And it's funny, the way that we do our show, we are always so like, this is what happened. Let's talk about who's hot. Why should we feel good about things? Why shouldn't we? But I feel like you have to almost lead off with this in this episode, because let's be honest, the Phillies don't have Bryce Harper. Like, we can talk about what just happened this series against the Mariners and all these positive trends, and we can do all of that. But if the Phillies don't have Bryce Harper, and they don't have Bryce Harper playing like Bryce Harper, is this a championship team? Like, it's not.
No,
So
it's not.
So it all starts here, right? I mean, they've done a good job to get through these first 26 games. I think they've missed some opportunities, obviously, but they've done enough to stay within reach. Now they're getting one of the 5 best hitters in the National League back in the mix next weekend, presumably. I mean, that's, again, if all goes according to plan here. And I think that this is it. Like, this is a major acquisition. That's the way that you have to look at it. Mm-hmm. You are getting roughly 45 games more of Bryce Harper than what an optimist would have told you back around Christmas time. I mean, that is a huge boost to this team.
No, it really is. It really is. And I think it will bring some more balance to the lineup, because we're going to talk about a couple players. But when you really look at it, like, they miss his bat, or his kind of bat, at the top of this lineup. They really do. The Phillies have stabilized and have played better baseball and have gotten back to 500, not because of the top of the lineup. Like, from 4 to 9 has been where the success has been in this lineup. 1, 2, 3, you know, I mean, Stott's been fine. I mean, obviously he's exceeded expectations, I think, a little bit, but I mean, he has become a little bit of a one-trick pony too. And Turner and Schwarber have not been good at 2 and 3. So, like, yeah, like, you add Bryce Harper, all of a sudden it puts people in a better position, you know. And when we talk about Trea Turner, I got some things on that. I was asking some questions, and it's going to be I think you're going to see a difference in Turner once Harper gets into the lineup. I think that not having that kind of protection behind him is what's hurting him a little bit. But we'll dive into that when we start talking about him.
Well, you talk about his bat, and you look at the stats, and you say, well, they haven't had the home run punch, and certainly he'll provide that. I alluded to it back on Monday when we talked following the Colorado series. You look at where this team's at right now, and you said it, 10, 12 hits every night, seemingly, except for maybe the finale against Seattle. That was a little different, 4 hits, 4 singles. But they are still leaving the 4th most runners in scoring position per game right now in all of baseball. 3.88 runners left in scoring position per game. Mets actually are the worst, by the way, and we'll probably talk a little Mets later on. But what I look at with this, it's like, you need that thump. And I alluded to this in one of the stories I wrote earlier this week. It's not just about batting average with runners in scoring position. The Phillies coming into the week, we're kind of sitting middle of the pack, but it's that OPS. It's getting that big hit, the damage knockout blow type hit with runners in scoring position. It's something they've not been able to do for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned. Specifically, Kyle Schwarber has really struggled to string together anything consistently. Trea Turner got off to a good start in terms of batting average, but we were like, man, this feels kind of hollow. And now this past week, and we'll talk about Turner a little bit here as well, but now the batting average is starting to plummet. He just doesn't look like Trea Turner right now. And so you see all these issues. So just to get that presence back, just to have that guy that can deliver the punch is going to give just a totally different look and feel to this entire thing. And it's going to take somebody out of the lineup that you just don't really want to see in the lineup on a nightly basis. So it's about that intimidation factor. It's about, as an opponent, you're game planning, you're saying, oh man, like, we got to deal with him now. We got to deal with this lineup. It just lengthens the entire thing out, getting him back.
Huge. I mean, it really does lengthen it out. I mean, you know, we could sit here and try and be, you know, get into Rob Thompson's head, but I would like to think that your lineup, as soon as Harper gets back, is probably Stott 1, Turner 2, Harper 3, Castellanos 4. I guess Schwarber 5. Real Muto 6, Marsh 7, Bohm 8, Sosa 9 is probably your lineup. And when you're starting to talk about guys who've gotten off to, you know, decent starts, although I know Bohm's hit a little bit of a cold stretch here, but when you talk about batting guys like Marsh and Bohm 7 and 8, right? I mean that's really, that you've really lengthened your lineup and with Harper. And not only that, you've put a situation where Trea Turner now will get more pitches to hit, which he's currently not getting because Schwarber is not as, Schwarber's a power threat behind him, but he's a 210 hitter or whatever he's hitting, 207. So he's not going to get, you're not like you could pitch around Turner a little bit because the threat of, it's easier to strike out Schwarber than it is Harper. But you put Harper behind him, Turner will get better pitches. And then the benefit for Harper is Castellanos is playing out of his mind right now. And so when Harper comes back, he's going to get some pitches to hit with Castellanos batting behind him. So I think the lineup, just plugging Harper in, just makes it that much better.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting now. They come into this series against the Astros. They have some momentum, some real momentum, I think, for the first time this season. You string together 3 consecutive series wins, and you really then feel like, hey, you know what? Maybe they've put some of those early season stumbles behind them. And yesterday for me, we're both there. We're both in attendance, and you were down there early. You stayed after. Someone broke into my car and stole my laptop. So I observed the game in person, and then what did I bounce? The 8th inning? I said, I got to go write this story. I got to beat the traffic and get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
So I come home and I'm working through the story, and I really think that yesterday's game, like, I don't want to assign too much importance to a single game, but I really do think getting to the 500 mark ahead of this Houston series, having an opportunity to finish the month of April over 500, and though it will be difficult to do that against the Astros the way they're playing right now, I just think is really big from a mental standpoint. And one of the reasons that they are here and that they've arrived at this point is because of Matt Strahm, who yesterday was phenomenal against the Mariners. He pitches into the 6th inning, only 60 pitches, 5 strikeouts, a couple hits, no walks. I mean, he was about as good as any Phillies starting pitcher has been this season. And now to date, 23 plus innings pitched. I believe the ERA is sitting at 2.31. He's striking out over 12 batters per 9 innings. The whip is nasty. I mean, like, everything with this guy looks good. So much so that you are starting to hear people bang the drum, like, put him in the rotation for good. He's got to be in the rotation for good. He's better than Bailey Falter. He's better than Taijuan Walker right now. I think that there's a couple things. Let's first talk about the decision to remove Matt Strahm from the game in the 6th. 60 pitches, he's rolling. The press box, you would have thought that Rob Thompson walked out to the mound yesterday and flipped off the crowd the way that the press box reacted to him going out and removing Strahm at that point. Before the game, 80, 85 pitches, he tells everybody. I felt like the press box felt betrayed, honestly, the way that we were all talking up there yesterday.
Yeah, and I guess in the moment, right, you're watching a pitcher pitch really, really well. And I'm one of the guys who would have said, leave him in. It's like no one's touched this guy. Why not? And at least until he gives up you can have a pitcher warming up. I don't have a problem with somebody being ready to come in the game, but let him get a base runner on first or something. He was just cruising at that point, and Thompson takes him out of the game. And so, immediately my reaction, like the rest of the press box, was like, this is crazy. Like, why are we doing this now? Especially considering
the wussification of Major League Baseball. It's not the way it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and so I'm a little bothered by it, but at the same time, and the other reason I was a little bothered by it is because, even though the bullpen's been great, really great over the last 11 games, you don't want to burn these guys out. They're pitching a lot of innings, right? I mean, you start looking at some of the bullpen guys, the top 6 guys have all thrown, 10, 11 innings, 12 innings so far. It's a lot of innings for the first month of the season. So that was why I was a little not liking the decision. But after some time, after some conversation, and we'll get into. I had a nice little one-on-one chat with Matt Strahm in the clubhouse afterwards. It does make more sense. It does make more sense. And from this perspective, Strahm hasn't in his career. He's never thrown more than 116 innings. That was in 2019, I believe it was. The last couple years, he's dealt with injuries. So last year, he only threw 44 innings in relief for the Red Sox. The year before was only six innings, I think he did, before he was done for the year. And then he had the pandemic shortened year. He didn't throw a lot. So he was, he hasn't thrown And so to suddenly put him into a spot and say, okay, now we brought you in as a reliever, now you're a starter, and now we want you to throw a lot of innings, you got to pump the brakes on that. And so the conversation I had with Matt Strahm was this. I said to him, I said, are you cool with this? Because he's answering the questions in the first media session in front of the cameras, and he's saying all the right things, typical answers. Hey, no, I'm good. I'll throw 1 inning, I'll throw 4 innings, I'll throw 10 innings, whatever Rob Thompson wants. It's his team. I'm on board. So he says all those things. But I pull him aside separately and just want to just dive into it a little bit. And I asked him about it. I said, is this because you haven't thrown anything more than 116 innings in your career? He's like, yeah. He's like, look, I get it. And this was exactly what he said to me, Bob. And I'm a little warning for anybody listening. I am going to use a curse word here just because that's what he said. But I said to him, I said, do you get, would you be upset about, being pulled from a game where you're pitching so well? He said, in normal circumstances, I'd have the ass if I'm getting pulled at this point, right? And he said, but with this team, October is more important than April. So I get it. He said, I've had this conversation with Caleb and with Rob before the season even began. Kind of knew that they had to kind of be, take real ownership of controlling innings for pitchers early in the season so that they are fresh come the end of the year. And he said, so when Rob comes out to take me out of the game, Sir Anthony needed a little bit more time in the bullpen to get loose. So first, if you remember, Stubbs goes out to the mound first and talks, and then the umpire's walking out, and then Thompson comes out, and Thompson doesn't, wait for Sir Anthony right away. He goes out there to have a conversation. And so you think that he's probably trying to, we're thinking and the crowd's thinking, oh, he's probably just checking in, see if the pitcher's still good to go, and then, decides to hook him. And Strahm tells me, no, that's not what happened. he said he knew he was coming at, like he knew because they had this talk, right? And he says, so Thompson gets out there. Thompson says, all right, we're just going to make pretend we're having a conversation so we can give Sir Anthony a little bit more time. And Strahm looks at him and goes, so do you want me to motherfuck you a little bit so it looks like I'm really angry that you're pulling me so early?
That's great.
Isn't that great? Right? I mean, that's legitimately what's going on. So he's on board. And I said to him, I said, so in other words, what you're telling me is if you were on a team that did not have the aspirations that this team has, that you'd be more upset about being pulled than again. He says, absolutely. I'd be pissed if it was 5 2/3 or 5 1/3 and I'm getting pulled, pitching as well as I was pitching. He says, but this team's goal is a lot bigger than, one start in April. So he's on board with it. They're all on board with it. So at that point I said, you know what? Okay, I'm good. I get it. I'm on board with it.
Well, I think there's a few different things that you can kind of unpack throughout that conversation. And one of them is, I think it does speak a little bit to what the Phillies are building here in terms of what goes on in that clubhouse. This is a team that has championship aspirations, and this is a pitcher that I think is going to very much figure into what they do and what they're able to accomplish. And the fact that he's so readily bought into this idea that, hey, obviously you're throwing the ball really well right now from a brand standpoint, from a Matt Strahm standpoint, this would be an opportunity to really put yourself on the map. There's something a little bit different between going 5 1/3 shutout innings and going 7 shutout innings. And, the ability to really take the ball there and just make that statement early on. But the fact that he says, okay, I'm willing to give that up. I'm willing to come out at 60 pitches and not go 80, 85, max effort, max distance all the time, because I want to win, because I know what this team needs. I know what I'm here for. I think that really speaks volumes to what's going on with the Phillies from a, clubhouse dynamics standpoint, I would say.
Yeah. And look, we know, we reported yesterday in your story that Walker's injury is not bad. He didn't even go to the doctor, doesn't even have an MRI. He threw his normal 90-foot plate catch, and then he's going to have a bullpen today in Houston. And assuming everything's fine, he's going to stay on target. He's going to stay in the rotation. We know Ranger Suarez is coming through 2 innings yesterday. He's beginning his rehab assignment. He needs another 2 to 3 rehab starts in the minors, and then he'll be back with the team. And so the question is, assuming they all stay healthy, what do you do? I mean, do you keep Strahm in the rotation, or do you take him out and go to put Bailey, or stay with Bailey Falter? And I think they're going to stick with Bailey Falter. And you might say, well, why? Why would you do that? And the reason is because they look like they feel like they can weaponize Strahm in multiple roles out of the bullpen. Do you need him to come in and get one shutdown inning against, a couple of tough batters in the 7th inning? Yes. Do you need him to throw 3 innings in relief because your starter got blown up and you need to stay in the game so he can come in 4, 5, 6? Yes. They kind of like they used Ranger Suarez a couple years ago.
Exactly.
Right. So that's how they're going to look to use Strahm here. And I think that that's a smart plan, that he's probably better off for the team long term in that role than he would be just as your 4th starter or whatever.
We saw how valuable that role was a couple of years ago when Ranger Suarez was that Swiss Army knife and taking down all of these different situations and all these different roles. But what Matt Strahm has done over this first month is kind of show that he might be able to take on more high leverage situations than you would have otherwise initially expected. Like when he came here, you figured he's the length guy. He's the guy that maybe gives you the 5th and 6th if a starter doesn't get deep into a game. Maybe if there's a left-handed part of the lineup, you go through it with him. But he now feels like a guy when you look at the strikeout stuff, like look at the strikeout numbers. And that's what really jumps off the page at you. He has not been traditionally a massive strikeout guy. And now all of a sudden you're looking at this and you're like 12 per 9. And it's not because he's being paired favorably against certain parts of the order. It's not because he's had favorable matchups again and again. Like he's a starting pitcher right now. He's giving you 3, 4, 5 innings to start. These numbers are eye-popping. And so you see that stuff is playing and that his pitch arsenal is playing differently this year. And so now all of a sudden you start to think like, man, you said it, you call him a weapon. There's a lot of different ways that you could potentially leverage what he brings to the table. And then in addition to that, I really think that this is all about preservation. Like, yeah, it's more important that he's here in October and that the team has bigger and better goals. And that's all fine and well, but in a vacuum, you say like, okay, what's the difference between a guy throwing 60 pitches and 75 or 80 pitches on April 27th? Is that really going to be the difference between him being effective come September or being ineffective? And I would argue that, yeah, like right now, saving him 15, 20 pitches in a game where he's rolling, like just give him a shot, right? Let him go get it. But when you do these things consistently and you have a plan and you let the plan play out over start after appearance after appearance, and you're smart with certain players, it does add up. I would argue that it does help. And for that reason, and by the way, there is a baseball element to this. Matt Strahm has faced 5 batters this season, the 3rd time through the order. So it's not something that he's done a lot of. He hasn't been hurt. There hasn't been major damage, but he hasn't done it very frequently. And 2 nights prior, you saw Bailey Falter go into that that top of the order again for a 3rd time. And he got banged around. And like, if you're Rob Thompson, you sit here and say, the way my bullpen's going right now, what is it up to 35 and 2/3 innings pitched, 2 earned runs over the last 11 games. I mean, it's been utterly absurd. Like, and it worked. So I have no problem with it, but it's not about so much the conservative approach to the pitcher. It's about the why of it. And I think that it's important for fans to understand the why of what's about to happen. Because if Walker does stick in the rotation, Suarez comes back, you as a fan are sitting here looking at what's played out over this first month and said, Matt Strahm's been arguably their 2nd best starting pitcher. How the hell could you possibly think about taking him out of the rotation? It's insanity. This is why.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that you really pointed out there, Bob, because if you're doing it consistently, if you're saving 15, 20 pitches a start, let's say, and then you start 20 times, well, think about how many pitches you've just saved. Now those pitches are saved and that much more arm is there come October, right? I mean, so that's what this is about. I do worry a little bit about overusage in the bullpen, but this is Rob Thompson's answer. And if you watch the press conference, I mean, I asked him, I said, if this wasn't a 1-0 game, I mean, I know Julio Rodriguez is coming up and you think, he is the best player in their lineup, right? So he's coming up for the 3rd time. He's a dangerous hitter in a 1-run game. I did say, if it's not 1-0, if it's a different scenario, does Matt Strahm stay in? And he said, yeah, probably. Right. So that's the baseball element that you're talking about there. Because if it's not if it's 3-0 Phillies, he probably let them pitch those extra 15, 20 pitches and save a little bit out of the bullpen, especially going into a series with Houston where now if you look at it, Kimbrel and Kimbrel's not going to be available. Dominguez is not going to be available. So you have no back end of the bullpen righties available for tonight's game, at least against the Astros.
Yeah, it does leave you a little bit short-handed, and if it plays out where they get hurt because of that tonight in the opener, you start to say, well, come on, man, like this was your opportunity. And we'll be able to react to that come Monday. But I think that when it comes to preserving the bullpen over the long term, it all comes back to this rotation. And here's a take. Aaron Nola has not been Aaron Nola to this point. And Zach Wheeler has been okay. Look at the last 2 starts. He's had the 1 blow-up inning in each. You feel like he's on the brink of giving you that vintage Zach Wheeler start where you're not saying, that was pretty good, but like you just need that slam dunk, home run, boom. Hey, that's what we're talking about. This is the guy that is a Cy Young contender year in, year out for this team. Like we haven't seen that start yet. And this weekend would be a great time to get it, especially when you look at Aaron Nola, especially when you go into tonight, like, hey, Aaron, you didn't have a great World Series against these guys last year. I know that you had the great start down there at the end of the regular season, gets the Phillies into the playoffs. So you've had mixed results against this Astros team. The Phillies need some length tonight. They need Aaron Nola to beat Aaron Nola tonight. And I don't want to do 20 minutes on Aaron Nola. What is he? Did he get the contract? Is he a 2? Is he a let's just punt on that. But the Phillies bullpen is only going to pitch this effectively if they start to get length out of these starting pitchers. Like it's time now. 5-6 times through the rotation, like, okay, guys, let's go.
Yeah, no, I mean, if you look at Nola and Wheeler's numbers, I mean, they're almost identical. The only difference that really stands out to me is Nola's strikeout numbers are down and his walk numbers are up. We can go into 6 million reasons why that could be the case, but you're right. You need a little bit more length. He needs to get through a 7-inning start probably, because if you look at the bullpen, they were able to save Alvarado yesterday they were concerned because he had thrown, I don't know, I think it was like 22 pitches the night before when they got the save against the Mariners on Wednesday. But Brogdon's been used the last 2 games. Kimbrel's been used 2 straight games. Dominguez has been used 2 straight games. So you really are limited. You're limited to, I mean, Soto pitched an inning and a third yesterday. I mean, he's probably available, but he did go, have an up down in between, which is like, okay, so now you got to be careful there too. So you're looking at Soto and Alvarado as available, and then who? Luis Ortiz, Junior Marte. Yeah. Are you comfortable with that? I mean, and Ortiz has been great so far. I mean, I'm not trying to knock.
Are we going to get the Junior Marte breakout game tonight?
And that's what I'm saying. Like these guys, this is what you have if Nola doesn't go long. So like that's why you need him to give you that. A 7-inning start is almost paramount. I mean, 6 is absolute, has to be 6. Anything less than 6, and they're losing the game tonight because they just don't have the arms behind them for tonight's game. So you need them to get at least basically baseline 6, but 7 would be a huge help to that bullpen, especially in this first game of this series, because you don't want to kill these guys knowing what you have, a 3-game series against this team coming up.
And listen, I mean, Aaron Nola went 7 last weekend against the Rockies. The Rockies, by the way, are not the Houston Astros. That lineup is vastly different. But given the start that he had, we talked about this on Monday's show, bumpy start against the Rockies where you go, oh my God, here we go again. Like he's going to get knocked out in 3 innings, 5-6 runs. He stabilized, though, gets through 7, gave him the length, only 4 hits allowed. He was really good after that first inning. You hope that he is able to ride whatever confidence, whatever momentum he built in that last start into this one tonight. And listen, we're talking about this series as if it's the postseason. Like, oh man, they got to get game 1. Like, my thing is, you better get out of there this weekend with 1. You just get out of there with at least 1.
Look,
it would be great to win it, but
Bob, they could lose tonight's game. They just need the length out of the starter.
Yeah,
that's more than anything else. Like, I mean, even if you lose the game 2-1, 3-2, whatever, you need the 7 innings from Nola. The result, you want to win the game, but the result is less important to me than it is starting to save this bullpen a little bit. I think that's important. Plus, it's important for Nola to start to become more like he's he's been in the past, and kind of have one of those starts where you're like, okay, that's more vintage Aaron Nola.
Yeah, no,
So.
Absolutely. Before we move on, Craig Kimbrell, his turnaround has essentially coincided with the turnaround of the Phillies bullpen.
Yeah.
He made a mop-up appearance on the 16th of April, I believe it was, is when things really started to turn for him. He actually had a couple outings prior to that where he did not allow a run, but did not pitch well. There was the ghost runner against the Marlins that scores in extras. He allowed an inherited runner to score in another appearance. Like, it just – the first 5-6 appearances for Craig Kimbrell were disastrous, where you're like, man, $10 million, they're not going to get anything out of this guy. Now, all of a sudden, though, he goes out yesterday, throws the ball extremely well. Quite a turnaround, and I will throw some numbers out there for you. I mean, his first 4 appearances were especially ugly. 3 1/3 innings pitched, 5 hits, 5 earned, 5 walks, a 13.50 ERA, and a 3.00 whip. I mean, I don't want to say the fans overreacted, but you see that type of performance. And then you see the salary and like they bring this guy in to be a high leverage guy, a potential closing option. And you go, they whiffed. Like, and I don't blame fans for jumping immediately after seeing Corey Knebel and some of the other, veteran guys that this team's brought in to pitch big innings over the past few years and say, here we go again. But, I mean, he's done a great job really here. And like I said, dating back to the April 16th, and I wrote this yesterday, coincides with the bullpen's overall turnaround. He's thrown 6 scoreless innings over 6 games. He has a pair of saves, a pair of holds, and a win. And not like one of those like fraudulent wins where he yields a run and then the Phillies scored 2. He did it with a scoreless appearance. And over that time frame, he struck out 11 and walked none. I mean, this has been vintage Craig Kimbrell. What are we to kind of believe out of him? Like, at this point, do you say, like, the Phillies might have gotten a steal? Or, hey, you know what? Nice stretch. I still have some big-time questions about what he really is at this point in his career.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Bob. And, I can remember sitting there at the home opener with you, and he couldn't throw his slider 60 feet. I mean, it was bouncing 2 feet in front of the plate. It was terrible. And so then he was a one-pitch pitcher at that point, and guys were just teeing off on him. And that was, he was wild. He couldn't throw strikes. And then when he was putting the ball over the plate, he was getting hit hard. As you know, I talked to him yesterday too. He was one of the guys I was, you sent me a text that I won the beat yesterday because of all the talking that I was doing privately to guys. But I actually did an interview with him, and I asked him about that. And it was really just a matter of, getting that slider right and getting the feel for it, and really kind of, making the adjustment that was necessary to get it back to where it needs to be. And once he did, that was the turnaround, right? I mean, that's been the difference. And now he looks like the Craig Kimbrell of old. And so that's really what really what it came down to. And look, you'd like to think that the track record tells you more about, like, what's on the back of a player's baseball card tells you more about what the guy is, and you can't look at small samples of poor play or great play and say, oh, well, that's going to be different now. And yes, he is older, and eventually you do break down. But if you are able to harness it and figure it out like that, and be a veteran guy who knows how to fix it when it goes wrong, then I think that you should be more optimistic than pessimistic with him. And yeah, do I think that they have to be judicious with his innings as well because he is a little bit older and he's being used in different situations? Yes, they do. But one of the things that he said to me says, look, we know going into every game who we're going to be expected to face and when. He said, so it's not like, it's not necessarily about a role per se specifically, but it's, hey, if we're ahead and we're facing this part of the lineup's coming up, depending on the inning, 7th, 8th, 9th, be ready. That's when you're going to be. So if you're watching the game and monitoring what's happening, you kind of know. You kind of know when you're going to be pitching. So it's not necessarily about, oh, I have to close. Oh, I have to set up. It's a slight difference. It's like, oh, they want me to pitch against these 3 hitters, right? And it could be the 7th inning, it could be the 8th inning, it could be the 9th inning. And only if we're in this situation where it's a 1-run game or 2-run game, whatever. And so that mindset starts. So then kind of understanding where he fits into this bullpen, I think that helps him too, because he's always been a creature of habit. He's been a closer for his entire life for the most part. So I think a combination of things has allowed him to right the ship a little bit. And I think that's why you're seeing the success that he's having now. It's not look, this bullpen's as great as it's been. They're going to have their moment. There's going to be a couple times when things go wrong, okay? And we're going to be like, oh, I can't believe the bullpen blew that game. It's going to happen. It's baseball. Yeah. But at the same time, when you see that they're able to be this good over this stretch of games, right? It lets you know that the makeup of the players in that bullpen is the makeup that you want. And it's not something like we've had the last few seasons where it's like, I have no idea what the hell this guy's going to do. I think that's a big difference.
We watched the game together yesterday, and listen, 4 hits for the Phillies. They entered the day 1-10 when they scored 3 runs or fewer. So they were, I would say, fortunate to win the game yesterday with just 4 hits, all singles, 1 walk.
4 singles.
Yeah.
1 walk, no runner in scoring position scored.
Yeah.
They won the game.
They were 0 for 2 with runners in scoring position yesterday. So
Castellanos scored from first on a single is what happened.
Yeah.
Kind of a unique situation, but that's what happened.
So point being that the offense yesterday it's not like everyone was clicking and then there were 2 guys that were noticeably not good. But I said to you at one point, Alec Bohm yesterday, comes off another situation here where he doesn't have a hit. And then I go back and say, man, he's been pretty bad lately. Like I said, this was not a good homestand for him, but it was a really weird mix. He had a big hit in the key spot on Wednesday night. He had a 5-game hitting streak at one point during the homestand. And you're like, well, come on, man. But they're 5 for 26. He went from 324 to 289. And what I had flagged to you kind of was he still only had 3 home runs. And, he gets off to this start where we're talking about this guy could be 25, 30 home run guy. And I just said, I haven't wavered from that. I still think that's there, but he's no longer tracking 25 home runs at this rate. He's looking at more like the 18 to 20 range. And I don't think that the Phillies season is doomed or that Alec Bohm's career is doomed if he doesn't hit 25, 30 home runs this season. But I would like to just see some more consistency in terms of the pop. And, right now I think he's kind of going through a little bit. I'm not particularly concerned about that, but I am kind of wondering, and you're talking about Craig Kimbrell, and you mentioned the back of the baseball card. Well, if you look at the back of Trea Turner's baseball card, you see some damn good numbers over a span of years. 273 right now, and it feels a lot worse. And Trea Turner on this past homestand, 4 for 29. He was 0 for 3 yesterday. He struck out 10 times. And I don't know about you, but I didn't see a lot of balls come off his bat this past week where I said, got robbed on that one. He's just running into some tough luck right now. I mean, you go and look at the Baseball Savant page, Trea Turner, and you see a lot of blue. You see a lot of ice cold, below league average, really bad. I assume that he will get it together. I personally am not super concerned about what he is, but I think it's fair to say that he's been very underwhelming to this point.
Yeah, he has. And, you threw 2 guys at me there. So let's take them in 2 different steps. With Bohm, I think that he's a guy who is just going through a stretch right now. And look, it happens in baseball. Everybody gets that. And you're right, though. I do want to see more power from him when he gets going again. I don't want it to just be singles to right center, which he's mastered that. He's mastered the 180-foot bloop single to right center, right? I mean, it's almost like it's like a 5-iron. He's just kind of plopping it out there, right? So yeah, I mean, do want to see a little bit more of the pull power that he definitely has in him. And I think we will see it as the weather gets a little bit warmer and stuff. I mean, if you really look at it, I mean, I didn't break it down this way, but I'm just trying to in my head, because watching all these games, it's almost like he has struggled more in the games that have been not the friendliest weather, and he's in the games that have been better weather or indoor is when he's been really good. So I don't necessarily know if that's a thing, right? I mean, just seems like it, but yeah, he was way off yesterday. He was struck out the 3 times. As for Turner, he is. So I asked him about it the other night, and he said he's struggling right now with pitches. He's swinging at balls and he's taking strikes. And he says it seems like the strikes that he's taken are right on the black, right? They're right on the box there. And that because of that, he's then chasing a pitch that's just a little bit further away. And he says, he said, it's fair to criticize. I need to earn the pitches that are in the zone. I need to earn them. And part of that, and I mentioned this earlier, I really think part of that is that pitchers are attacking him differently because he doesn't have a reliable bat behind him. And, Schwarber's boomer bust, right? We know that. This is not a surprise. He's going to come up there and he could hit a huge home run for you, but more likely than not, he's either walking or striking out. He's the 3 true outcome guy, right? So I think once you put him in a position, and Turner's also not when he gets his singles, he's not running as much. And I asked Rob Thompson about this. He's not running as much because they want to leave as much of a hole open on the right side with Schwarber batting behind him. Right. Now, Harper's a pull guy too, but Harper can use more of the field than Schwarber can. Right. So I think what you'll see is Turner will get better pitches once Harper's behind him. I think he'll have more opportunities to run once Harper's behind him. And I think we'll start to see the real Trea Turner at that point. But yes, through 26 games, certainly underwhelming and not the $300 million player that we all thought he was going to be.
I thought there was a reasonable chance that he would be the National League MVP this year.
Yeah.
And he has been far from it. I mean, it's been unimpressive. And I agree that Bryce Harper coming back into this lineup, we talked about the look and feel and the length, but more nuanced observation I think you just made right there is that, yeah, with Bryce Harper adding that element of protection, that might unlock some things for him. Maybe in pitches to hit, maybe the ability to get the run game going. He just has not been that impact player that you're looking for. And you would hope, and I think that that's really what this comes down to. If Kyle Schwarber gives you a little bit more and Trea Turner gives you a little bit more, and this is not to excuse what we saw from the bullpen at the start of the season or some of the issues with the starting rotation, but I just think that those 2 guys alone, if they give you a little bit more here and they were doing a little bit more damage in those key spots, you're probably talking about a team that's 15-11 right now and not 13-13.
Well, yeah. And here's the thing, Bob, and far be it, I don't want to make this a criticism of Bryson Stott, because obviously he's been off to a really unexpected start and been great in a sense. But keep this in mind. I looked this up and I was a little surprised by it, but not completely surprised, because
I know what you're about to say. Is this about this pull and opposite field contact?
No, it's not. But that's something we could talk about too, because I think that kind of plays into this, right? The Phillies' weakest spots in the lineup as far as OPS is concerned. Okay. The weakest is 8, which we know that's been primarily because Jake Cave has been batting down there and he's not been good. The second weakest is 2 at 685 OPS. Third is the leadoff spot, which was part of it's been Turner. On base is 307 for the leadoff spot. So the batting average isn't terrible. It's 271, right? Okay, that's not bad for the leadoff spot. But on base is only 307. OPS is only 705. So what we're getting out of Stott, I mean, Stott got off to such a hot start, and he's still hitting, 338 or whatever he's hitting. But he's not walking. We talked about this on the episode before, and it just seems like he's a singles only guy right now. And when he is getting on, and if you look at his OPS, if you look at the OPS plus of each of these positions as compared to the league average, okay, it's 82 and 76. So they're below league average in those spots. Now, Schwarber's 3 spots also below league average, and so is the 8 spot. And the middle of the order and 9 are all above league average, right? But if you look at those things and say they need more production from that part of the lineup, I don't know what the solution is there other than you need some better protection and you need more patience out of your leadoff spot. And maybe Stott's not the ideal leadoff hitter right now, but I don't know. I just wanted to kind of throw that at you and see where
He's
where
actually
you take that.
the walks are increasing of late. He's up to 5 now. Last time I talked, I think we said he jumped from 1 to 2. Now he's up to 5, but we're still talking about over 109 plate appearances. So the walk rate is not there, and it kind of is interesting when you dig into his numbers. I mean, he's hitting 339, but his OPS is only 827. You would think that at 339 that you're going to be tracking somewhere in at least the mid to high 8s. So that's not really there, that part of his game. The on-base percentage is decent at 368, but you said it. You called him a singles-only guy, and that's kind of more or less true right now. But it is interesting. I looked at you yesterday. I said, damn, it just feels like everything off his bat is going to left field right now, doesn't it? Like, it just feels like everything is opposite field with him. But you dig in on Fangraphs, and I'm looking at where, his directional numbers are at right now. And it's actually kind of surprising to me. So a season ago, he went opposite field 31.8% of the time. And this year it's only 33.7%. So it's a incremental increase. And his pull contact, which I find this to be stunning, has increased from 35.9 to 40.7%. Where the difference is his up the middle contact. He's dropped from 32.4 to 25.6. So when you're just looking at what he is, the pull contact is increased. He's not up the middle as much, and there's been a little bit more to left field. But as you know with him, like if you're going to go to left field a third of the dinking that's not going to result in extra base hits more often than not. That's you're dinking and flunking in front of the left fielder, which is fine. Like, again, I don't want to turn this into like any criticism of Bryce and Stott because it'd be absurd when the guy's hitting 339 and he's been everything that you could hope for and more. But you talk about like this lineup and some of the numbers that we're seeing and in vacuum, how effective a lot of these guys look when you look at the stat line. And we just keep talking about like these like little misfires or like there's just some element of this lineup that just isn't clicking the way that you think it should be. And when you dig in, this is what you start to see, like you start to dive in and you go, oh, like, man, they're right there, but they're just missing. And it's stuff like this that I think is the reason for it.
Yeah. And so again, it's not a criticism of him. It's more the way the things are going with the lineup, right? I mean, it's almost like he's getting emptier hits now than he was at the beginning of the season. He was carrying the team. Now, ever since he's been put into that leadoff role, it's almost like his hits aren't as important, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's weird, right? It's just weird how that feels. I don't necessarily know if it really translates that way statistically, but it just feels that way because I even look at his splits, and when he's leading off, his OPS is 753, which is
okay.
It's okay. It's okay. But his on base is 324. Whereas when he was batting 5th, 6th, and 8th, his on base was 375, 438, 500, right? I mean, it's just, yes,
well,
it's a much
you're
smaller
talking about a young player. You're talking about
a
young player that is in a different spot in the lineup, that has different responsibilities. He's probably going to be attacked a little bit differently. Like, there is some element. Like, look behind me if you're watching this on YouTube. You see all the mini helmets behind me? You know how this goes in the NFL. If you're a team that struggled the year before, you can get out to a good start in September and sneak up on some teams, right? Like you hear about this all the time. Like, wow, we didn't know that they were that good. They kind of caught us off guard. But by the time mid-October rolls around and you get into the flow of the season, hey, these guys can play a little bit. And I think that to some degree, there's probably a little bit of that right now with Bryce and Stott. You look at the stats a year ago, if you're an opposing team, you say, this guy can't beat us. He's not that good of a hitter. Oh, all right. He comes out the first few weeks of the season. He's red hot. He's one of the best players in all of baseball. And then all of a sudden, I think a lot of opponents say, okay, we got to pay attention to this guy. And not only that, when you jump from 6, 7, 8 in the back of the lineup up to the front, it's a different level of care and attention that's given to a hitter at that point. And I think that there has to be some period of adjustment. I think that some of that is coming into play with him as well. And the only other thing I'll say about Bryce and Stott, because I didn't even plan to talk about him today, and here we are, probably 7, 8 minutes on him. Isn't it weird when we talk about the lack of walks, 5 walks, 100 plus appearances or plate appearances? we credit so often how he's able to grind through at bats and he
I
works
know.
pitchers, and
Yes.
man, he's such a bitch to pitch to. By the way, like, how about you earlier with the disclaimer? Like, I'm about to curse in 20 seconds, so turn down the volume. I'm over here like once an episode, just like hard F word. But like, he is a pain in the ass to pitch to. But then it only nets out in 5 walks. It's like one of those things that you just kind of feel like doesn't translate, and over time, like, there has to be some correction to that.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think he'll be fine. But my concern is he's not going to maintain a 339 batting average.
Right.
So
No,
something has to change a little bit for him to continue to be productive at the top of the order. And I think it's that. I think he needs to get on base more.
Like, are you cool with if he drops down to like a 3? I think the answer to this is yes, but he's a 300 hitter. He's not a 340 hitter, and he walks 2 or 3 times per week more than he is right now. Like, do you feel like that all kind of comes out in the wash at that point?
Well, I mean, I'd still like to see a little bit more than just singles, but yes, I mean, I do. Look, you need to get on base for the guys behind you. I mean, when you see, obviously when Harper gets in, but you see the way Castellanos is hitting, like that, these guys can drive in runs. You need to be on base. So him and Turner need to set the table a lot better than they are. And right now, that's my concern, that they're not getting on base out of the 1 and 2 hole enough. That to me is, as a team thing, needs to change. And it looks like Stott and Turner are going to be those guys in those spots the most. So those are the guys that need to make it happen.
So I know there are a couple things that you want to do before the end of this episode. You have
I'll make it. This is the
thing.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do this as the one last thing, because the one last thing I had wasn't even that great. So let's make this the one last thing.
Okay.
So the one last thing I wanted to do is do a little bit of since we're 1 month into the season, do a little bit of buy and sell with you.
Okay.
I'll start with Phillies individual players, and then we'll get into some stuff around baseball. Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So buy and sell. The other day we were talking to Rob Thompson in the dugout, and he was asked, do you envision Edmundo Sosa as an everyday third baseman for this team going forward? And he said, yeah, I kind of do. Do you buy that? Are you buying Edmundo Sosa as a everyday third baseman for the Phillies, and can it work?
I'm going to sell that. And it's not because I don't like Edmundo Sosa. I think he's really good, and I'm really impressed with the player he is. I just feel like he's a player that if we saw him play 50% of the games, you're going to get more out of him. I just think we just don't know if he can do it every day. We don't have the track record there. He's their best option. They have to do it. So, like, I would say that. But in an ideal world, I think that the usage rate drops just a little bit. And he's a hell of a player, and everyone loves him. But to say you're the guy at third base every day, like, I'm not there yet. I would have to sell that right now.
Okay. Brandon Marsh off to one of the better starts in the game, in the sport. Okay. 338, 420 on base, 675 slugging percentage right now. Of his 26 hits, 14 of them have been for extra bases. He's been batting 5 in this lineup, obviously against right-handed pitching, bats down against lefties. Are you buying him as a real viable run producing slugging center fielder for the remainder of the season?
Can you ask me again in a week? My only thing with him, I've been so impressed, and I want to say yes. And I think if you go gun to the head right now, I would say I'm buying it. I just want to see it against a better level of competition. The Phillies have faced a lot of shitty pitching here, and they're about to face a lot of really good pitching, especially starting pitching. And if he can maintain that level, like if he can stay within that realm over the next 10 days here, I say, okay, like that's really eye-opening. I think the one box that needs to be checked here is, can you do it with some level of consistency against better pitching?
Fair enough. I'll give you one more position player. Let's talk about my guy, Nick Castellanos. 333, 394, 525, 920 OPS, 3 homers, 16 RBIs. I think he's third in the majors or fourth in the majors with 10 doubles. He's walking a lot more. He's even striking out a little bit less. is he back to being? Here's the buy or sell question. Is he a Phillies all-star this year?
You mean my current National League MVP pick, DraftKings Sportsbook, plus 10,000? Anthony, that is value. You talk about Jalen Carter at 9 for the Eagles being value. Nick Castellanos after this start, plus 10,000 to win MVP. Sign me up. It's real. I don't know that he's going to hit 330, but I think that Nick Castellanos is a viable offensive threat in this lineup. A guy that resembles close to the player that you expected him to be when they signed him. Is he that guy? I think he is. I really do. I would buy that. Is he the team's all-star? Right now, he certainly is. I think that if you had to send one guy, it would probably be one offensive player. It's either Marsh or Castellanos. I would have no argument with either selection. I think that there's still a little bit more pop with Castellanos. Like, I wonder if this past week starts to unlock that. Like, no, do I think he's going to be a 330 hitter? I don't. But do I think that he is a guy that can run into 25, 30 for this team? Like, yeah, I think that is there. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Again, like, it's early. You want to see a little bit more, but buy or sell on April 28th or whatever the hell it is right now. Like, yeah, I'm probably buying that.
Okay, cool. Now I want to throw some from around baseball. Buy or sell. The Phillies right now are 7-3 in their last 10 games. That is the third hottest team in baseball, believe it or not, tied for third with the Astros and the Rays. But the two teams that have been better in the last 10 games, the Pittsburgh Pirates are 9-1 in their last 10. They're 18-8, best record in the National League. And then the Baltimore Orioles are 9-1. 17-8, only in second place because the Tampa Bay Rays have been off to that ridiculous start. Do you buying either of those teams, or are you selling on them?
I buy the Orioles a little bit. I do. I love Toronto. You know that I love Toronto. You love Toronto as well.
Yeah.
The Rays have been phenomenal. I do think that there are real concerns about the level of competition they've played. There's going to be just natural regression. Then you ramp up the competition. The Rays are going to come back to earth to some degree here. I just am not really sold on the Yankees. Like, I just have this like weird thing with them. Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, it's such a lame comparison and easy to make, but like the Yankees right now give me Cowboys vibes. Like, they're good. You have to respect what they are, but like, I just don't feel like they're a true championship threat. I just don't. And I know a lot of people disagree with me on that. So yeah, I think that the Orioles are young. I think they're fun. I think that there's an energy there, and I think that they're pretty damn good. I don't know what they ultimately are. I don't have them as a 95 win team, but yeah, like, do I think that they're a team that can compete for a wild card spot? I do. The Pirates, I don't, but I will say the other night, I think it was Chris Taylor. Pirates were leading late. He ran into a 3-run homer for the Dodgers, and they beat Pittsburgh. And you say, like, you look at the start they've gotten off to, and then you have this brutal gut punch loss, and you say, like, that's the one. You know, like, that's the one now. All the wheels are going to fall off. And they bounced right back, and they beat up LA in the following game, and you kind of say, damn, like, there's some resilience there. I don't think so, but the NL Central stinks. And St. Louis is a dumpster fire.
Well, that was going to be one of my. I'll get them in a second, but go ahead.
Yeah, so you kind of like go like, hey, if you can just race out to, like, you know, not to be so parochial here, but like the 93 Phillies, like, you just come out so hot and you just catch some sort of magic that even if you hit like a little bit of a bump in the road later on, like, you've built up enough equity, maybe, but I don't buy it.
Yeah, I'm with you on both teams. My feeling on the Pirates is they are a lot like the Phillies were in Gabe's first year, where they were winning games and they were like, what, 10 games over 500, and you were like, and then you looked at that team, you're like, how the hell is this team winning? It was smoke and mirrors, right? I mean, so I kind of think that the Pirates are that, and, you know, hopefully they don't have a, you know, collapse like that Phillies team did and down the stretch, and terrible collapse, and we're like 20 games under 500 at the last month and a half of the season. But I kind of think that that's true. You mentioned the Cardinals. I'll get to them in a minute. I have one more team that's actually off to a decent start and playing some good baseball, and I want to kind of pick your brain on them a little bit. Los Angeles Angels, 14-12, right? They're only a half game behind the Astros and the Texas Rangers. Is it finally a year where maybe the Angels can put it together and get into the playoffs with two superstar talents?
Well, the one thing I will say that might be a little bit different about this Angels team is just the urgency. If you have enough, there's talent there, and there's been talent there for a while now. But if you at some point have enough pride, like forget like the performance aspect of this and like the individual players and like what you should believe and what metrics say they're going to regress. At some point, you get tired of being the what's it, tungsten Armo Doyle or whatever. Like you're tired of reading that shit, right? And like you say like, hey, we're better than this. And for the last couple of years, this has been insane. And you know that you're probably about to lose Ohtani, and you kind of have to win right now. And if I just feel like it's like, what more can Ohtani do? What more can Trout do? It's like these guys can play harder, play better, put up better numbers than they have. But I do think as an organization, there's got to be like a little bit of like, the clock is about to strike midnight on this whole thing. We got to do it right now. And you wonder to what degree that urgency might help propel them a little bit. I just, at the end of the day though, like if I'm putting in a betting ticket, like I can't do it because they never have done it.
Yeah. I agree with you. I just don't think that there's enough around those two guys.
Yeah, I just don't either.
To stay on par. Just a couple teams who've gotten off to slower starts than maybe expected. I'll start with those Cardinals. They're 10-16, and they're in last place. They're already 8 games behind the Pirates. Do you buy that they're that bad, or is there something that's going to that's a team that can fix it?
I think the manager stinks.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that the clubhouse energy there, I think is questionable. I think that there's some guys that aren't loving how some things have played out there. I do not believe that they can pitch at all. I know that you look at the record and what are they, 10-16, you said? And I'm looking at the run differentials here. It's only -5. So you say, okay, they should be about a 500 team. So in time, it evens out. I would just say real quick, they're the Cardinals. They always seem to kind of figure it out. There's a certain level of consistency that you have to credit, just like I said against the Angels. If I say, hey, they don't win, I know what the history says. I have to kind of give the Cardinals some benefit of the doubt, but I just think the pitching stinks. And I just don't think they're very good.
Yeah, and if you remember preseason, I mean, I actually picked the Brewers to win that division because I didn't like the Cardinals pitching. I didn't think it would be this bad, but holy hell, has it been terrible? Yeah. Another team that's slightly underperforming, and look, we could say that they're underperforming at the same level that the Phillies are underperforming. San Diego Padres. Everybody thought that they were like, they made the NLCS last year. They go out and get a couple more big names. They're spending money left, right, and center. This is going to be the team in the National League. And their offense has sucked so far, and they're 13-14. Do you buy that they're just mediocre, or do you think that there's a lot more there to come?
I think that you just look at the talent and you say, how can this be? And, we've spent a lot of time on this show talking about sample sizes and what can you really say about a team definitively through 20, 25 games? What's real, what's not? And you look at the Padres right now and you see 99 runs scored this season. You go back to what we talked about on Monday with the Rockies and how bad that lineup is. And I had made the point that at one point on Sunday, you look up at the scoreboard and you see that there were 4 different Rockies players in that lineup hitting below 200 and a 5th player hitting 203. And you just say, this is a terrible lineup. Well, the Rockies have scored 1 less run this season than the Padres. And you look at the names in that San Diego lineup and you say something doesn't compute here. So I have to assume that there is not just a little bit more there, but a lot more there. But you got to do it. And, that's a team right now that you kind of look at and say, like, maybe something's wrong from a dynamic standpoint, a clubhouse dynamic standpoint. But I got to assume that they get hot.
I got to assume that they're going to be better too. It's just interesting that they've gotten off to very similar start as the Phillies, and it's not because of their pitching, which we thought was probably not as up to snuff as their lineup was. It's their lineup that's really failed them to this point. Last one, and I'm going to make it a 2-parter. Let's go. And you briefly mentioned one of the teams already, but we got to talk about the 2 teams 100 miles to our north. The New York Yankees, 4th place Yankees, 6 games out of first, even though they're 15-11. Same record. New York Mets, come from behind, barely pulled out a win to avoid a sweep to the Washington Nationals yesterday. They're also 15-11. Are you buying either of them as a legitimate contender this year?
The Yankees, I'll be quick. If they don't make a significant addition, it's not that I think the Yankees are a bad team, but that division is just, I believe a lot in that division. Like I just told you, I believe in Baltimore to a degree. We know the Rays are good. We know what Toronto could be. I just don't think that they have enough to overcome all of that. I just don't think they're good enough. If they were any other team but the Yankees, and like you weren't reading New York Yankees, I don't think you would look at them as a legitimate contender.
Right.
I just wouldn't. As far as the Mets go, the only thing I will say in favor of the Mets is we talk about the Phillies' inability to hit with runners in scoring position. I alluded to this earlier in the show today. They have left more runners in scoring position than any team in baseball to this point, and you would think that there's enough offensive talent there that might even out a little bit. If it does, and they're already 4 games over 500 to begin with, that should kind of propel them forward. Do I think the Mets are going to be a 90-plus win team at this point? Like, I think they're going to be right in the neighborhood of that. I think coming in, I actually gave them 88. I think I gave the Mets 88 coming in. I'm pretty comfortable staying right on that number. So to what degree that makes them real or not, I don't know. I don't like the Mets. I don't think that they're a championship team, to answer your question.
Yeah, no, and neither do I. And I think that you're spot on with the Yankees because of the division that they're in. If they were in another division, I could look at that team and say, okay, that team can win a division, maybe if they're in a different division, but not that division. They're just not. And when you get behind,
it's games, right? Like it's real. Like nobody wants to count April baseball because with one time that team came back from 12 in July, like it matters. You're down 6 games in a loaded division. It's hard to overcome that.
Yeah, and it's a really good division. And so, like, I think you're right. I mean, I don't love their pitching behind Cole. I mean, if they got a couple guys that are okay, but I don't love it. But then when you go over to the Mets, man, and boy, oh boy, I mean, look, Alonso's off to a great start with the power. He's got 10 home runs already. That's great. And McNeil's McNeil and Nimmo's Nimmo. They're on base guys. They do a lot of good things. The rest of the lineup to me is just nothing. There's nothing there. They don't have a catcher, right? The rest of the lineup is just. I mean, Lindor is such a disappointment to me to this point. Since he's been in New York, they kind of call up Beatty because they're getting nothing out of Eduardo Escobar at third base. The other outfielders are. I mean, I think Starling Marte's finally getting old, and Mark Canha is nothing. Yeah. And they're not getting any pitching other than. Well, really not getting any pitching. I mean, Scherzer's suspended right now because of his sticky stuff situation, but no other pitchers pitching for them. And out of the bullpen, what do they got out of the bullpen? I mean, Brooks Raley's been okay, and David Robertson of all people has been okay, but that's it. Like I don't see it, Bob. I see nothing. I don't see this team as a contender. I looked at them initially and said they're the last playoff team. I had them getting in as the 6th seed this year. I don't know if they get it. I think that here's a hot take for you. The Phillies are ahead of them by the time they come home next weekend.
Wow. Okay.
And the Mets have an easy schedule coming up.
That's quite a statement given what the Phillies face over the next 6 games and some of the starting pitching they'll see.
Yeah, and the Mets have. I mean, they have 3 with the Braves, but then they have an easy stretch. I mean, they go to Detroit right after that. So, like, I just don't buy this team right now. I just really don't. I think that there's going to be a little bit of a fall off quick, and I think that it's ultimately. Look, the Marlins have been playing decent as well. I think ultimately, though, we're going to see over the course of the next few weeks, it's going to be Braves and then the Phillies and then everybody else in the division.
Well, I think that's a pretty good place to wrap this, huh? What do we go? 113. And again, I should have known better, but when we first hop on this stream here, we talk and I'm like, I don't know today. Like, I got a couple things. Maybe we'll go 35, 40 minutes, and here we are. So we will talk on Monday following this series. We think we have some pretty cool things lined up for the show here. And
should we announce it?
Yeah, sure. If you're still watching, go ahead, Anthony. You take the lead on this.
We're gonna have an interview on Monday. We will be talking this weekend with Phillies pitching coach Caleb Cotham. is going to be joining Crossed Up. So we'll have that for the Monday episode for you guys, and we'll talk all things Phillies pitching with Caleb. So looking forward to having that conversation with him. We're going to be talking to him this weekend from Houston. So, but we'll get that out on the Monday.
What's wrong with Aaron Nola? Why aren't you using Strahm? Why did the bullpen suck to start the season? We're going to hit all those topics, baby. So be there for that. Now, looking forward to that. That should be a lot of fun. You see on the screen there, you can follow us a bunch of different places, but on Twitter, at Up Phillies is the show account, at Ansan Philly. And I'm at Bob Wankel CB. Thanks for tuning in to Crossed Up. We'll talk again on Monday. Make sure that you're following us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those different places, YouTube, you know it. And we will talk soon.